Family cut me off for exposing my brother's cheating fiancée, called me a liar, and let me suffer for years. Now they're begging for my help to save him from paying child support. For years, my family saw me as the bitter, jealous younger brother who couldn't stand my older brother's success. They cut me off, erased me from their lives, and let me carry the weight of a lie I never told. Then, 3 years later, they came knocking, not with apologies, not to make things right, but because they needed something from me. This is how I got my revenge. 3 years ago, my brother Mickey was preparing to marry the love of his life, Nah. Our family adored her. She was charming, sweet, and, as my parents liked to say, a perfect match for my overachieving older brother. Mickey had always been the golden child, brilliant, successful, the kind of person who seemed to excel at everything. Me? I had taken a different path. I dropped out of college, struggled to make ends meet as a freelance copywriter, and, in my parents' eyes, was just another failure. That night, at a pre-wedding family gathering, I stepped outside for a smoke. My family didn't know I smoked, so I wandered a little farther down the driveway, away from prying eyes. That's when I saw a car parked near the house. Jacob, our cousin, had supposedly left for the night, so seeing his car there made no sense. Curious, I took a closer look. Through the fogged-up windows, I saw her, Nah, locked in a passionate kiss with Jacob. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. My brother's fiancée. Our cousin. At my brother's own engagement party. Nah turned her head and met my gaze through the window. Her face drained of color. I stubbed out my cigarette, turned around, and walked away. She ran after me that night, begging me to keep her secret. She swore it had only happened once. She sobbed, pleaded, promised she would never do it again. I didn't care. Mickey deserved the truth. The next day, I met Mickey for lunch. I told him everything, every disgusting detail, every word Nah had sent me begging for my silence. He didn't explode. He didn't scream. He just sat there, silent, his face unreadable. "Thank you for telling me," he said before walking away. I thought I had done the right thing. Days passed. I heard nothing. Then, out of nowhere, I found myself blocked by every single family member. Confused, I drove to my parents' house, only to find the door slammed in my face. My mother's voice, cold and sharp, cut through the wood. "You are not welcome here. Do not come back." I didn't understand, until I went to Mickey's apartment. He answered the door with an expression I will never forget. Hatred. "You're pathetic," he spat. "You just couldn't stand to see me happy, could you? You made up this entire story because you're miserable and jealous." Nah had gotten to him first. She had painted me as the bitter, spiteful little brother, desperate to ruin his happiness. And he had believed her. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I just walked away. That was the day I lost my family. For 3 years, I built a life without them. It wasn't easy. I struggled with depression at first, grieving the loss of people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But I got better. I became successful in my own right. And I realized something: they had never truly valued me in the first place. Then, out of the blue, my parents showed up at my door. Not to apologize. Not to say they were wrong. But because they needed me. Mickey was getting divorced. As it turned out, Nah had never stopped cheating. She had been with Jacob for years. Mickey only found out after he caught her texting him. But the real gut punch? Their son wasn't even Mickey's. A court-ordered paternity test revealed the truth. And now, Mickey didn't want to pay child support. So they needed me to testify, to prove that Nah had been cheating all along, even before the marriage, so he could legally get out of supporting the child. I stared at my parents as they sat on my couch, pretending that the past 3 years had never happened. They spoke to me as if I was still their son, as if we were still a family. "We need you," my mother said. "Oh, now you need me?" I laughed. For 3 years, they had erased me from their lives. And now, because they needed something, they wanted to pretend that I mattered? I refused. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. They didn't take my refusal well. My father yelled. My mother cried. Mickey, for the first time, begged. He said he didn't want to raise a child that wasn't his. He said it wasn't fair. He pleaded with me to help him. I simply told him, "You made your choice. Now live with it." I shut the door in their faces. They sent emails. Messages. Tried every manipulation trick in the book. But I didn't respond. Months later, I found out through a cousin that Mickey won the case without me. Jacob had finally stepped up as the father, pressured by Nah. They were now planning to get married. Karma had done its job. Mickey got what he wanted. Nah got what she deserved. And me? I moved on. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my family again. And maybe, one day, Mickey and I can repair things. But as long as my parents are around, I know it'll never happen. But you know what? That's okay. Because for the first time in my life, I chose myself. And I have no regrets. Update 1. I have made up my mind. I am not testifying for Mickey. I owe him nothing. I owe my parents nothing. And I owe my so-called family absolutely nothing after the way they treated me. They cut me off when I was telling the truth, called me a liar, destroyed my reputation in the family, and now, because they need something from me, I am suddenly important again. The audacity is unreal. They had no issue pretending I didn't exist for 5 years, and now they are acting like we are one big happy family who helps each other out. No, They don't get to pick and choose when I matter. They made their choice when they threw me away, and I am making mine now. Mickey found out about Na and Jacob months ago. He caught her texting Jacob, and that's when the truth started unraveling. She admitted she had been cheating, but of course, she downplayed it and said it had only been going on for a year. She tried to justify it by saying Mickey was too focused on work and she felt neglected. Classic cheating excuses. But the real bombshell was the paternity test. Turns out, their 1-year-old son isn't even Mickey's. He lost his mind, obviously, but Na is still insisting he should continue paying child support because, for the past year, he has been acting as the father. Mickey wants out, and that's where I come in. They need me to testify that I saw Na and Jacob together before the wedding to prove that this affair wasn't just some recent mistake but something that has been going on for years. If they can establish that, Mickey might be able to avoid paying child support. But the thing is, they have known for months. They have known I was telling the truth this entire time, and not once did they reach out to apologize. Not once did they acknowledge that they ruined my life for no reason. They only showed up when they realized they could use me. I spent days thinking about it. My friends kept telling me that this was my one chance to reconnect with my family, that I should at least hear them out, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. My parents haven't changed at all. They have not once admitted they were wrong. Instead, every message and email I have gotten from them has been about how I am making a huge mistake by refusing to help Mickey. They are still justifying what they did, saying they had their reasons for believing Na over me. Apparently, my past resentment towards Mickey made it reasonable for them to think I was lying. Sure, I fought with them when they constantly compared me to Mickey. Sure, I was vocal about how unfair their treatment was. But at the end of the day, I was their son, and I told them the truth. They didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt. They cut me off like I was nothing, and now they expect me to just forget that because they need me. The worst part is that I actually considered it for a moment. I thought about how different things could be if I helped them, if I used this as an opportunity to mend things. But then I realized, even if I helped Mickey now, it wouldn't change anything. The second this was over, they would go right back to pretending I didn't exist. They don't want me back in the family, they just want what I can do for them. That is not love, that is not family, and I am done being used. If they had reached out to me months ago when they first found out the truth, if they had acknowledged their mistake, maybe things would be different. Maybe I would have been willing to hear them out. But they didn't. They waited until they needed me, and it tells me everything I need to know about where I stand with them. They don't care about making things right, they just care about winning their case. They haven't even apologized. Not once. Every message I have gotten has been about how I am heartless for refusing to help, how I am letting my brother suffer, how I am being selfish. No, what's selfish is cutting off your own son, destroying his reputation, and then crawling back years later only because you need something from him. They don't get to guilt trip me when they are the ones who made the situation what it is. My friends kept pushing the idea that family is complicated, that people make mistakes, and that maybe my parents just didn't know how to say they were sorry. But I told them everything. The way I was treated, the way I was insulted, the way my parents humiliated me, the way they still have not taken any accountability. I told them how, even now, my parents' messages are full of nothing but guilt tripping and excuses. After hearing all of it, my friends finally understood. They said they would support whatever I decided, and that was all I needed to hear. I have spent 5 years rebuilding my life, and I am not about to throw that away for a family that doesn't even see me as a person unless I am useful to them. If they truly cared about me, they would have reached out before they needed something. They would have reached out the second they found out I was telling the truth. But they didn't, because to them, I am not worth anything unless I can be of service. I am not playing that game anymore. They made their choice when they threw me away, and now, I'm making mine. I don't need their validation. I don't need their fake apologies. I don't need them. Mickey can figure this out on his own. Maybe this whole thing will finally teach him a lesson about who to trust. Maybe it won't. Either way, it is not my problem. I warned him, I did everything I could, and he chose to believe a liar over his own brother. That is not something I can forgive, and that is not something I will forget. My parents destroyed our relationship, and I am not going to be the one to fix it. They can live with the consequences of their actions just like I had to. I am done. Update 2. They showed up again. This time, they weren't just ringing the doorbell, they were banging on it like they were trying to break it down. I ignored it at first, thinking they would eventually give up and leave, but then my dad started yelling outside, saying he knew I was home and demanding that I open the door. I don't know how he figured it out, but at that point, I realized they weren't going anywhere. The last thing I wanted was to cause a scene in my neighborhood, so I finally gave in and opened the door, already regretting it. The second I did, I knew this was going to be a mistake. My dad looked furious, my mom had her usual disappointed expression, and Mickey looked desperate. I barely got a word out before my dad launched into a rant about how I was being selfish and cruel by refusing to help my brother. My mom jumped in, saying that no matter what had happened in the past, we are still family, and I should do the right thing. Mickey didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking miserable while my parents tore into me like I was some villain in their sob story. I let them rant for a while. I think part of me was just curious to see if they would ever acknowledge what they did to me. If they would apologize, even once. But no, it was the same thing all over again. Guilt trips, blame, and acting like I was the problem. My dad straight up said, "You need to stop being so bitter about the past. We all make mistakes." Yeah, Easy for him to say when he wasn't the one who got cut off, humiliated, and treated like garbage for telling the truth. When they finally stopped to breathe, I told them exactly what I had been holding back this whole time. That I didn't owe them anything, that they didn't get to just show up after 5 years and expect me to help like nothing happened, that they had already made it clear where I stood in this family. And I laughed when my mom tried to say that they had good reasons for believing nah over me back then. Because seriously? That's still their excuse? That they thought I was just trying to ruin my brother's happiness? I told her flat out that if she had even considered for a second that I might have been telling the truth, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. That's when Mickey finally spoke up. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days, and said he really needed my help. He said that he never wanted kids, he never wanted to be a father, and that it wasn't fair for him to have to pay child support for a child that isn't his. He said that if I ever cared about him, even a little bit, I would help him. I think that was the moment I truly stopped feeling bad for him. Because I did care once. I cared enough to tell him the truth. I cared enough to warn him. I cared enough to try and save him from exactly this situation. And he was the one who threw that away. I told him as much. I said, you made your choice. You believed nah over me. You let everyone think I was a liar. And now that it's backfired, I'm supposed to just fix it for you? He looked away, like he couldn't even face me, and quietly said, I was wrong. Too little, too late. I told him I didn't believe for a second that he or our parents actually wanted to fix things with me. That the only reason they were here was because they needed me. If they truly regretted what they did, they would have reached out months ago when they first found out the truth. But they didn't. They waited until they needed something. I told them straight up that I was done with them, and they needed to leave before I called the cops. My mom lost it. She started yelling, saying that I had no right to speak to them that way, that they were still my parents and had raised me, and I owed them. That no matter what, I should put family first. I told her, that's funny, because you didn't seem to care about family when you threw me out of yours. Then I shut the door in their faces. I stood there for a while, just listening as they argued outside for a bit before finally leaving. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. The nerve of them to act like they still had some moral high ground, like I was the one being cruel, like they hadn't completely destroyed our relationship 5 years ago with their own choices. I thought I would feel guilty after that. I thought maybe I would start second-guessing myself again, wondering if I should have just sucked it up and helped. But I didn't. If anything, I felt relieved. Mickey made his bed, now he has to lie in it. I warned him. I gave him the truth on a silver platter, and he chose to ignore it. He chose to believe nah over me. He chose to cut me off. He chose this. Now he gets to deal with the consequences. And my parents? They will never change. They have spent years making excuses instead of just admitting they were wrong. Even now, they refuse to acknowledge that they threw me away for no reason. They refuse to apologize. And if they can't do that, then I have no interest in having them in my life. I do feel bad for Mickey in one way. If our parents had been better, maybe we would have actually had a real relationship instead of this toxic mess. Maybe if they hadn't spent our entire childhood making us compete, we could have been actual brothers instead of rivals. I am not saying he's innocent in this, he absolutely played his part, but I can't help but feel like our parents created this entire disaster by putting him on a pedestal and treating me like I was nothing. And the worst part? They are still doing it. Mickey might actually get out of paying child support. Legally, since Jacob is the biological father and has been in contact with both Nah and the baby, he should take responsibility. It sounds like Nah is trying to push Jacob into stepping up, and if he does, then Mickey will be off the hook. But I am not getting involved. I don't care how this plays out anymore. It is not my problem. I won't lie, part of me hopes Mickey gets out of this mess. Not because I care about him, but because Nah doesn't deserve to win. She is manipulative, cruel, and has been playing everyone from the start. If she ends up with Jacob, I can already see how this is going to go. That relationship is doomed. Any relationship that starts with an ultimatum like that is built on a weak foundation. Eventually, Jacob is going to resent her for forcing him into this. It is only a matter of time before this whole thing implodes in her face, and honestly? Good. That's the karma she deserves. Mickey will move on. He will recover from this. But as for me? I am done. I have spent too much time being angry, too much time grieving a family that never really cared about me in the first place. I don't regret slamming that door in their faces. I don't regret standing my ground. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And it feels really damn good. Update 3. It has been 3 months since my family last showed up at my house, and honestly, things have been quiet. No more emails, no more messages, no more showing up uninvited. After I slammed the door in their faces, they must have finally realized that I was serious about cutting them off for good. At first, I kept waiting for them to try again, but when the silence stretched on, I knew they had finally given up. And that was when I really started to feel the weight of everything lift off my shoulders. The only updates I have gotten about Mickey and his divorce have come from my cousin, the one family member I actually still talk to. Turns out, Mickey won't be paying child support. After months of back and forth, Jacob finally stepped up and agreed to take full financial responsibility for the kid. At first, he resisted, tried to play the I never agreed to be a dad card, but Nah basically gave him an ultimatum. Either he took responsibility, or she would cut him off completely. And just like that, he caved. The irony of it all is not lost on me. Mickey was so convinced that Na was his perfect, loyal wife. So convinced that I was just some bitter, jealous brother trying to ruin his happiness. And now, the woman he defended so fiercely has left him for Jacob, the same guy I warned him about. The same guy he threw me away for. And the best part? He had no one to blame but himself. My cousin says Na and Jacob are already talking about marriage, trying to rush the divorce through as fast as possible so they can make things official. I give it 2 years before it all crumbles. Relationships built on lies and ultimatums never last. Right now, Jacob is agreeing to everything because he feels like he has no choice, but resentment doesn't just disappear. One day, he is going to wake up and realize that Na manipulated him into this situation, and when that happens, she is going to end up exactly where she deserves, alone. Mickey, on the other hand, has apparently thrown himself into work and is trying to move on. He isn't dating, isn't socializing much, just burying himself in his job and keeping his head down. A part of me wonders if he regrets how things went down between us. If he ever thinks about what would have happened if he had just listened to me that night. If he had just believed me. But I will never know, because he has made no attempt to reach out. And honestly? I don't care. I don't hate him. Not anymore. I don't hate my parents either. I used to. I used to carry all this anger, this resentment, this desperate need for them to realize what they did to me. But I am done carrying that. It took me 5 years to understand that I don't need them. That I never needed their approval, their validation, or their acceptance. I don't need an apology that will never come. I don't need closure from them, because I have already given it to myself. I have my own life now, a life that has nothing to do with them. My work is going well, my friends have become my real family, and for the first time in a long time, I am actually happy. Letting go of them was the best decision I ever made. If Mickey ever reaches out, I don't know what I will do. Maybe I will ignore him. Maybe I will hear him out. But that is my choice now. Not his. Not my parents'. Mine. For years, they controlled the narrative, turned me into the villain, made me out to be the problem. But not anymore. I warned them. I told the truth. They were the ones who chose to throw me away. And now, I am choosing to move on without them.